Capetonians and visitors, welcome and thank you very much for coming to this launch this evening. A special thank you to Gavin Morris and his whole museum team who put this together, and a tremendous amount of work went into it, which is not obviously evident, but really I'm really grateful to him and his team for their contribution. Thank you very much, Gavin. We've all listened to speeches when the speaker says, our next speaker needs no introduction, and then spends the next 20 minutes going through his or her resume, line by line, telling the audience what they invariably already know. Judge President Dennis Davis, in addition to writing 10 books and over 150 academic articles, assures me that he's the only legal professor who's been dismissed from a football field for abusing the referee. And that's verbally abuse, not physical abuse. This resulted in him being moved from right wing, not to the bench, but to another position on the field. Fortunately, not left out. We are indeed privileged to have Judge Davis address us right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tony, and thanks for inviting me. This is a particularly interesting project if you think it through. I suppose it's always a guarantee to have a good crowd in at a book launch when you photograph most of the people. I'm pretty much assured that they're going to come. But what is particularly intriguing about this book, if I may, are two or three features. In the first place, I asked Tony, why do this? Why photograph these marvelous photographs about various Capetonians? And his answer to me was, he said that he'd been in Egypt, and I think it was Geniza, if I'm correct, and there was a small Jewish community, and he asked one of the remaining members about the community. It turned out that many years earlier there had been a very large and vibrant community. And he had this idea that as the Cape Town Jewish community was a vibrant community, it wouldn't be such a bad idea to capture the kaleidoscope of the community and the nature of the community in a book. Because in 100 years' time, whether we have a community or not, people will be able to look at this book, look at these photographs, and say, there was a community. And it does seem to me it's the most wonderful enterprise, so creative, because what, in fact, this book is about us, and about essentially the community that was created by our parents and grandparents, and which essentially has resulted in that which we are today. And this book, it seems to me, does two things which are utterly remarkable. In the first place, it documents, if you wish, through photographs, a whole range of different people. If you look through it, it's quite amazing the different sort of occupations and activities that people have on a daily basis. It's not just like a homogeneous bunch of people who essentially just ply one direction and one direction alone. This is a community of vast interests and very, very different personalities. It truly is heterogeneous, if it is possible to call a Jewish community heterogeneous, most of whom come from Ashkenazi tradition. So it achieves that in a remarkable way. I suppose at the same time, it does something else, which is preempts, as it were, the traditional Jewish reaction of the faribel. Why was I not in the book? Right? And I've already heard people say, how did X get there and not me? Right? But what I find about this particular book, which is so important, seems to me, is that it documents the community without fear or favor for those of status, those of not of status. And in some ways, if you don't mind, it reflects something which we read in the Parsha of this week, which is a quite remarkable Parsha, Mishpatim, on which one can go on for hours. But there's a fundamental proposition in this week's Parsha about loving the stranger. And the fundamental issue about loving the stranger isn't so much, we can go into the commentaries on what that means, but there is a thrust to this, and it is the following, that if you love the stranger, and if you, in a sense, don't other people in manner which so often is happening, including in this country as we speak, what it means is that you've got the quality of empathy. And that is absolutely central to this Parsha. It is central to the Jewish tradition. The quality of empathy, the idea being that you treat people with dignity, you treat people as equals if it is possible, and you embrace the concept of community. And that's what this particular book does. It embraces the concept of community. I was absolutely delighted when I saw these photographs. Some of the people I don't know, and I've lived here almost my entire life. I mean, of course, I do know some people like Mr. Hodis, who sort of, afflicts us on a daily basis in court. But and there are many other famous people here too. But in all seriousness, if you look at this book, it's not a book which essentially, in which Tony went and said to himself, who's got status in this community, and those are the people that I'm going to photograph. And I want to make a further point, which I think is equally important, in the concept of empathy, the concept of the stranger, of the person who's not entirely like us. I have felt for a very long time, and this might be a slightly controversial proposition, but here it goes anyway, you probably expected that from me, is that our community, not quite the same as it was when I was growing up, when there didn't seem to me huge differences between people who were religious and people who weren't, between Orthodox and Reform, between various forms of Orthodox and Reform. We didn't seem to have fights about who could actually go to the cemetery on Holocaust Day, or any of that sort. We seemed to be a community which took the view, if you were Jewish, well, that was enough. Or as Chaim Weizmann famously once said, what is in relation to his definition of a Jew, anybody mad enough to call themselves one must be one. Right? It seemed to me central to the quality of the quality of the Cape Town Jewish community. I think there was always a difference. I'm not suggesting we've lost that. In fact, to the contrary, when I read this, when I looked at these photographs, I thought, wow, here is somebody who's chronicled our community in all of its heterogeneity. It does not prefer one form of orthodoxy over another, Reform over Orthodox, or anything. It simply says, here we are. We're Jews. We're Cape Town Jews. We've built an extraordinary community. We have a schooling system par excellence. We have other community organizations of which we must be justly proud. We're a vibrant place. We may be able to exchange different ideas with each other. We may not be able to exchange ideas at all, but we're all part of the community, whether we're climbing mountains, whether we're arguing in front of judges, whether we're in fact selling equipment for climbing up mountains. It doesn't really make a huge difference. And if you're religious or not religious, you're part of the community. And Tony, you've done us an unbelievable favor, because what you've done in this book is to affirm what we really are, which is that we have an empathy whereby we actually regard each other with dignity, with care, and with concern. And we look at ourselves and we look at this book and we're proud to say we are part of a vibrant community. And yes, in 100 years' time, when people look at this book, they'll say, wow, there was a community. And hopefully there still will be a community of Jews who, in a sense, hold their Jewish identity as very important, but do it in their own individual ways and have sufficient empathy to respect the manner in which other people hold their identities important to them. I really wish to congratulate you on a quite remarkable contribution to the history of our community. Thank you.